Okay. Boa tarde. We can take our seats, we'll get started. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and that you had a nice coffee afterwards to wake you up. But don't worry, if you didn't, we're going to try and keep this lively and keep you engaged this session as well. Before we kick off, just a few housekeeping notes. You should see in front of you some evaluation forms. This is for you to give us feedback on the conference, sessions that were valuable to you, speakers that you've seen what you like, which you didn't see what you'd like, themes that we maybe should be addressing, the whole range of things. I can't really emphasize enough that they're very important to us, Automotive Logistics, as the organizers. We use your advice to build our conference program and to hopefully improve it each year. At the end of the conference, there'll be a prize draw. It's a bottle of wine. So, please take the time to fill it in, and we'll do a little draw. And if we pull your card out or your evaluation out, you'll win some wine. We'll also, at the end of the day, be having our gala dinner at a place nearby called Captain Santos. So there's I think, already direction. There's a coach that'll be leaving at the end of the event, but then there's also directions if you want to walk or drive. It's really not far at all. So we're looking forward to that. Okay, so coming into our third session, which is titled Making a Multi-Modal Brazil. Perhaps based on what obviously we've heard this morning and what we know to be the reality, this might sound a little bit like more of a dream than obviously what we maybe have today, since it's kind of far from some of the reality that we see today, with most things moving by road. This session might have a little bit more focus on outbound logistics, but not necessarily entirely. We have people in the audience who can speak to inbound. I think Stephan from BMS can also speak to some parts movements as well, and also other commodities which do move multimodal. I wanted to go back again to this theme we mentioned in the morning about logistics, the competitiveness of logistics, and how logistics can make Brazil competitive. And someone mentioned this morning from PwC Mexico as a competitor now to Brazil. And I mean, there's lots of reasons why it may be gaining some ground or moving ahead of Brazil for investment. But one thing you can't deny about Mexico is it has a multimodal platform, whether it's moving a large proportion of vehicles northbound by rail, sometimes increasingly by short sea as well. There's also lots of intermodal on the container side, again, between the U.S. and also between ports. So this is an area where we can see Mexico ahead, and increasingly we realize we have to send out the message that for Brazil to be competitive, it needs to develop further the multimodal. I mean, with automotive logistics, we do events in every market, and actually Mexico will be one we're doing. You can also see that in front of you as well. But if I can just speak to an experience in another market where a few years ago multimodal in automotive would have seemed almost a pipe dream as well, as India. Similar demographics, similar conditions to Brazil in some ways, huge scope, huge size, but almost no rail, at least for vehicles. In just the last 4 or 5 years, there was a big push from industry to communicate to the railway ministry, the transport ministry, and it did have an impact. They have rewritten some of the legislation in India. There's a new policy that allowed for privatization and some private operators to design and operate the railway for automotive. And I mean, just this month, there are some services that are kicking off there. So I only say that just to say that change can and does happen. And so just because something isn't the reality today doesn't mean that it can't, that it can't affect that change. I'm sure these are discussions that and Flavio is also having in their committees. Coming on to our session now, we've got two great panelists who can speak to their own experience in Brazil with trying to make a multimodal future and other efficiencies that we can talk about, obviously the challenges as well. We can talk on the vehicle side, and as I mentioned, other commodities as well, like two-wheelers. Let me just introduce our two panelists from each will have a presentation. We have Flavio Batista, who's the Vice President of Latin America for Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics. And we have Stephan Gruener, Managing Director for BMS Logistica. So again, lots of interesting ground to cover. I hope that during the Q&A and discussions we'll get lots of other people involved. But let's invite up Flavio now. Thank you. Thank you.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, all. I know that participating in a conference after lunch is not the easiest thing in the world, but I promise that between Stephan and myself, we'll try to keep you awake. First of all, I would like to thank the organization for this invitation, the Automotive Logistics. This is a very interesting theme and so important for us all in Brazil. Between myself and Stephan, we'll try to split our presentation and the address of the theme, making multimodal in Brazil. We'll split it into two. I'm going to try to place it in a perspective, in a general perspective of what would be multimodal in Brazil. And Stephan's going to go into details and present one or two business cases that he has. Before that, I'd like to take these opportunities. I would show you 2 or 3 slides to give you an opportunity to know a little bit better our company. All the manufacturers that are here today normally see us as a navigation company, a shipping company. But we are also multimodal and logistics company with the capacities that are different in different parts of the world. In Brazil, not necessarily we offer the same products that we offer in Europe or in Asia or in the United States. We'll go into the multimodal. There are 6 modes. I'll try to address the 4 that are mostly used in Brazil, not necessarily the most important one, but most used ones, and talk a little bit about the future, talking about the from the standpoint of my own standpoint and my companies, based on the experience that we think could have a better multimodal logistics in Brazil. Very quickly, Valente, Wilson, Sams, we have basically 5 services that we sell. Ocean is the core of the company, is the company with over 160 years in the maritime transport. We have 2 terminals, own terminals around the world. The inland distribution, we also have in some parts of the world, we have the own trucks, and in other parts of the world we work with partnerships, which works quite well. Technical services are some centers that are spread in the manufacturers themselves, or either in the ports or in other location inside the country. And the supply chain solutions, when we place this solution, we have with the same client 2 or 3 of these services that we sell. So we try to provide services from the plant until the delivery to the concessionaire or the dealer. So we move some 4.3 million vehicles a year, and the great majority of which, although ocean as our core, 1.9 is in ocean and 2.4 million is inland transportation. So we do a lot of logistics, and higher even is 6 million if we consider everything that goes through our terminals. Now another theme in the multimodal transportation. The definition of multimodal, if you ask 5 different people, you will have a different definition. So the idea is to put what's more correct and more applied in the multimodal transportation. Some people say I do ocean, I do air transportation, and I do also road. The multimodal is when one sole entity is hired, and it does the management of more than one modal from the origin to the destination. It's responsible for everything that happens between the 2 points. This is basically the definition of multimodal. The role of the provider of multimodal transportation. In this slide here, I'd like to address the 2 points that I think are most important, which is to help in the construction of a strong brand. In most cases, the product's not only the design or the quality of the vehicle, behind that, this morning we talked a lot about this, is there is a strong logistics, and this logistics is transparent. It doesn't show to the final consumer, but it helps a lot the manufacturer or the producer to have a better brand in the market, which amounts to its credibility. A good example of that, if you take a truck working in a mining company, this truck works 24 hours a day. The cost of that truck being stopped can generate a lot of losses. If you have 48, 72 hours to have for that truck to go back to work, the impact is very, very high. If you have a logistics behind that and that truck is running after 24 hours, certainly when the same client, your client, wants to buy a product, this will be determining for him to make the choice of the product. So the logistics behind that and the multimodal transportation is very important, and it's part of this strong brand, which is your product in the market. This morning, somebody asked me who should do this link between the modals, whether it should be the client or, but both can do this role, can perform this role. But 3PL is should be the most adequate person from my standpoint to do this management. Many times the OEMs, not always, end up by segmenting their logistics. The 3PL role, what is this? They look at logistics as a total chain, so they take that thing, I take care of that and you take care of this, and they're going to look at the chain as a whole. And this, he will try to put together the several infrastructures with one sole management. It's easier for them to put together this infrastructure, trying to find an optimized flow, and it gets up by being easier than for the client. The indirect cooperation by the clients, 3PL, many times the OEMs, they talk to other entities, but 3PL can just do this link amongst two clients of one sole segment in an easier way. As I said before, this part that puts together the infrastructure and this management that they had, why not if they put together a management, an optimization of a flow that works with client A, why not apply it to another client in the segment B and let them have competitiveness, not only due to logistics, but the product with the best quality will be the winner. This optimization of the chain will bring the costs down. So with the lower cost, you would have a higher margin when you sell your products. And lastly, the visibility, total visibility, or exposure. But what you seek is exposure, not individual, but in the total of your logistics chain. The car leaves the machine leaves the plant. Where is it going to be in 2, 4, 5, 6 days? Where it's going to be delivered in the country until it gets to the dealers, so that the client will have this exposure. So this gives you credibility when you can tell your customer that what time your car is going to be back to the dealer. So the client's expectation or the customer's expectation is based on facts of what we have today as far as our client bases go. But what's the expectation of the client? It's deliver the product as fast as possible in a safer way at a better cost. And this trackability, we have a system that we do this management. We have this possibility of passing this visibility on to the client. I imagine that others also do, but this is crucial for logistics. If you can't control and know exactly where to manage your providers with the KPIs and the reports that the system passes on to you, it's very difficult to improve your distribution. The logistic cost seems like a high cost. You'll hear something like from 3 to 30%. This obviously depends on the product. If it's a value-added product that has a value added, that's higher. But in large scale, with the costs, with the products that have a low added value, 30% is very difficult to work with, because what's going to be your margin? So We want to understand the challenges that you have, your needs, work together, optimize this your logistics chain, and seek a multi-modal if that's the solution. Bring this cost, which was 10-15 years ago 10 to 5%. Efficient logistics, it equals competitivity, and logistics gives you better competitivity, and you maintain higher margins. But if you fight for the best logistics, you manage to have a quality product that's delivered very fast to the market, you have higher margins. The modes, I'm gonna go through that very quickly, so I'm not gonna waste time in each one of them. Start from road transportation, which was presented this morning. It has divergences here, 15%. This is scary, 1.6 million of kilometers of roads in Brazil only, 15%. He presented a number of 6, but of this 15%, only 6% really have conditions or would be assessed these roads as paved roads. The other 9%, they either didn't have any maintenance and they're abandoned. It's kind of scary, stunning. If you compare to the United States, 60%, 6.4 million of kilometers are paved. So this shows that we still have a lot of room to improve in Brazil. The transportation, road transportation, obviously has its benefits. It has higher possibilities, has better handling, but it represents high risk when we talk about damages and theft, and it's not a cheap means of transport. That's why the multimodal many times may bring the scale that you need of capacity, cost, and quality. So air transportation, very well, efficient, but the cost, the operating and maintenance costs quite high. There's great dependence upon the airports. It's safe, low rate of accidents. It's not very much used, especially for machinery and vehicles, but it's all very used in the parts business. Well known in Brazil, it's the hydro water transportation. We talk about maritime, we split it into two, and the international and from one country to the other, or in Brazil the coastal transportation. It's great scale, competitive cost, but it has great advantages. That's not for all places. You have the desired frequency that may make the transit quite long. This is a great problem that we have in Brazil. This would be a great solution for the great majority of our problems, which would be a combination. It wouldn't substitute the road transportation, but it would be a great combination with the road transport. It's the railroad. Last week I was in Mexico. We talked about Mexico a lot. I visited some plants there. People talking about 250,000 vehicles, the capacity of each one of the plants that I visited. The market's huge, 80%. Mexico had a better partnership than us. They have with the United States, we have with Argentina, and 80% of their volume goes to United States, and 70% of our volume goes to Argentina. Of this 80%, most of it is done through the road. Through railroad, I'm sorry, in Mexico. You have wagons with 2-3 levels, a great scale, low cost, low rate of damages. So we must have this transportation means in Brazil as well. I heard about you talking about 26 million units this morning. Without a solution like that, it will be very difficult to handle. Same thing goes. It's also for grains and for the steel industry. It's little used for containers, and it's zero for automobiles and machinery. This is just data compared with the United States, and even with Argentina, we're well behind them. the challenges of the multimodal. We talked a lot about the ports and the roads and airports, so I'm going to focus a little bit in the integration of systems. Um, uh, from my standpoint, experience of some contracts that we have, the integration of systems is something that's very difficult. To integrate a system in the same model, if you take two transportation companies, it's already difficult, but integrating this system with two different models or more, it's even more difficult. So this has been a great challenge for us as 3PL, or in some cases 4PL, and companies have very low technology levels. Some of them are family companies. I work for a family company, but investment in the technological part, many times they don't have this knowledge. It's very high investments, so they think I either buy my equipment or invest in a system. They end up by buying more equipment, a few more trucks, or better specialized piece of equipment, and the system becomes not very important. The EDI, many companies in the transportation business, they don't even know about EDI. They don't have an IT department. They don't have an exposure thing. And in the future, without this technology, it will be difficult and it will be very dear. So, legislation, you know that better than I do. It's complicated for our market. The taxes and other things are also a great challenge for us. I'm going to give you an example. Always closing my presentation, opportunity of multimodal in Brazil. I don't see how this would not happen. The coast navigation in Brazil for automobiles and machinery. This might happen in the next 10 years. It's inevitable. I'd like to give you an example. A machine leaving the region of Porto Alegre with the final destination Bahia, Salvador. The distance is of some 3,000 kilometers if it's transported in a truck. The approximate cost is 20,000, and there are challenges and a disadvantage. Combining this same machine from Rio Grande to Salvador, this would be the approximate cost of the road transportation, and having this machine placed in Salvador, this is the cost, and then from Salvador terminal to the dealer. Freight, it's quite expressive savings. We're talking about units. Imagine that in a large scale, depending on the volume of this OEM. In vehicles, it's not only the capacity. When I say capacity, I say availability of equipment to carry these vehicles from some regions to others. The cost is really high. We're talking about being more competitive. I think this is it's large difference, and it's not very different. But this transit time is not very different. When we put the ships, then it will be very difficult. If you have a good logistics planning to have a demand aligned with the production, this would be possible. It's possible to manage this once you have a flow of this volume. And the trend of the frequency in the future would be to increase, and this transit time should be reduced. Future of multimodal in Brazil.
So the expansion of the railroad net all over Brazil, there is a link north and south, although there is a difference. I'm not specialist, but there is a difference in the railroad, and it is possible to do this, but the branches do not happen. The equipment is not here. If you pick up the United States or Mexico, where the carrier who has the concession of the railroad, you can go there with a logistic operator, do the investment, place your equipment there, and you pay a fee for that. They use this method. It has to come to Brazil, Otherwise, it will be difficult to work only with the roads. The standard of cabotage to cars, I think this will cancel the carriers. This is a perfect combination, but you've got to have the cabotage. I think that today it's something out of our area, but this is the container, this is a market in expansion. Better optimization of modals and improvement of the trackability systems. In multimodal, you've got to have visibility, a possibility of planning, managing your logistic chain. Just showing some photographs I took last week, but I see this the future in Brazil, if not in Brazil, in the Latin America as multimodal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Flavio. Again, showing us, if not what we have as a reality today, then the direction we need to go and some of the benefits of a multimodal system. Let's invite now Stephan Gruener from BMS.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon. I'll start with a practical example. Our company acts today as a partner with Honda Motors in Manaus since 2001. In Manaus is a certain area that demands multimodality. It happened for some years in a very simple way, turned to barges, the barges with 30 trucks. The ports are not ports, they are some land, and so it follows. After that, it goes 3,000 kilometers up to the south of Brazil. So you can see here in this map the river 3,500 kilometers, and after that the railroad or the highway. Then the plant produced 1.5 million motorcycles, and in Manaus the electronic area pays more by freight. When you have a peak on Mother's Day or Christmas, this may affect a production because you can't even make sure the flow of this production, and you can imagine the cost. Cabotage has been introduced during the last 4 years, and the sharing is around 30 or 40%. It is a very difficult operation, and they depart from Manaus, but we have Suape, Salvador, Santos, Imbituba, Rio Grande. These are the ports. The expectations of this project, what do we expect of a cabotage project? It's a project of enormous dimensions. Of course, we think about sinistrability or the disasters. In the container, if you have these accidents, you have a prevention against accidents, you have a reduction in damages. So these occurrences of accidents are many in these areas. Against the project is the increase of inventories. You have a greater lead time. You have the navigation that goes up to Santos, and it takes a long time, and you also have the stopping places where you have this accumulation of containers. The trip takes longer, And in management, you can have a better adequation and planning to your system or to your project. The vessel can allow great flexibility, and you have flexibility to cover peaks. Talking about containers, in the world, it is the most efficient way of transporting our goods because they meet a global standard. And less administration of single shipments. You are not treating these carts by carts with several road operators. Many companies, they face many problems, even financial problems. You have some hazards that made your management very complex. You have a greater concentration of volumes to your shipment. You've got to change the mindset. The flow changes, so you concentrate more volume in a shipping with 1 or 2 leavings, departures per week. This is something to discuss in the area of sales. You make an agreement with your dealers. How are you going to serve the market under this new reality? And bureaucracy is also present in cabotage. The amount of documents is very high. The treatment is almost of a ship that is bringing cargo from abroad. These are official data. You may find this on the press. Reduction of the freight cost in 20% with a calculation over inventory. Reduction is 5%. We have an increase of 7 days in lead time. This is an average. And a reduction of CO2 in 20%. You can read every day on the newspapers. This service is very simple and difficult, and I'll mention the difficulties we find. There is an imbalance of frequency and delivery of the different modals. The cargo arrive, but we don't have the ship. The processing is very high. In Manaus, we have 7 days a ship waiting for departure. This bottleneck in the models, the capacity of ports many times is not enough, and the bureaucracy. These are some small ports that are beginning the containers transportation. The frequency is very low. There is only one vent carrier. It may break and you can't move inside the port. These are extreme realities. Pecém port is very small in the southeast of Brazil, and as most of the ports, Santos is one extreme example where there's a big difficulty of access. What have we changed in the company to manage the process? We decided to create a tool to eliminate the manual handwork of controlling information. So we try a complete digital system of the project, all the messages, the IDIs, where we could access till now. So you have your data bank, all the necessary information with all the necessary links to the customer and the government organisms, and this tool must be easy to use. So to transform the manual, the hand, the paper operator that is controlling invoices. We had at some areas 8,000 invoices, everything in paper. So the electronic means came into action, and so this person is someone that executes, analyzes, and the tool must be easy to use. You have a screen where the operator views everything that is going on at the same time, and he will act over this. You have inventory control. I also have my control, it is in my pipeline, so I can see also if there is any item that I may put on a route that is going to start in 2 days. I can use this route that automatically generates reduction in cost. And we have trackability, everything connected with Google Maps. The client can see where goods are, and he can make all the performance evaluations. It's a tracking and tracing standard for distribution. Quality control, many times you have a record in a chart or an Excel chart. We have the Pareto charts, and we can see where are most of our problems. We can act over this problem and see the origin of the problem, try to find a better solution. We have the financial control. We have some locks. If the operator wants as a gross margin X less than the predicted, he cannot close the route. He needs approval. It's the manager of the headquarters, and he approves or not. You have situations where you have a drastic drop of volumes due to season, so profitability decreases dramatically. You have to deliver the product, you've got to understand your loss. But these are not levels that will be decided by the operator, but rather by the system. The system controls and tries to find the next layer of approval. This is about a motorcycle. You see a chart with all the control points that we defined inside the chain. We always, and together with the information tracking when we receive the invoice, all the control points that are operational. In these points, we have the people account for the operation, and they see where some abnormality happened so that they act over this problem. We see this not only in this operation, but in other operations, such where the information is online, it's present to the operator, and he will act, and it must be easily accessed. Cannot be mixed Excel or paper. It must be easy to use as a smartphone. This is our target. We also have a possibility of major corrections. When you are on the tip, you are not going to correct all the problems. For each phase, you have to follow your targets. But here you can prioritize for a certain term, and you can rearrange your routes to meet the term that had been broken in the previous route due to cabotage, for example. Another point, the access to the final customer. Today we have the possibility of inserting this information. The resale, they can have an information about this and what is the realistic term to deliver the goods. The involved stakeholders may have a general view on why and how the process is going on and where the problems are. This is interesting. We implemented here a tool in the beginning of 2014, and finally it was implemented here in May and June. And as this control was made easier to our operators, actions were taken and they were correct. And so the delay rate decreased, showing an improvement of 12%. This is an example. We did not expect also to have this figure, but we have so much information, so much data and abnormalities, and people, for example, they go to the fire department and it's a service of fire. You have to solve the problem. You have to extinguish that fire. So this has shown results. The fact of training people, implementing a tool, it's amazing how you can improve your performance. So it's important to optimization of this chain. It's not only the multimodal. Here, the quality of partners. We have many partners in a multimodal chain. The customer, the truck, that's not a big company, the port, terminal, the armor, the dispatcher, and you have many companies, and they must have quality. You've got to have transparency in information, and efficiency is a challenge because many times this integration is not so simple because it's not between companies. So for example, I say I need this information, it's necessary for me, but I can do more. IDI communication today is very simple. Languages are common, but we have some barriers as to the collaboration among companies, those that participate in the process. It's more a desire. I wish everybody looking to a strategical object that is common. And it's important to define responsibilities in case of failures in processes, because you have the debt, the fault, the fail, and in these cases we must have the clear definition of what is safer. We need to have the insurances in these chains. This is important. We've got to know where are responsibilities. Qualified people, enough people. We know there is deficit and also operational leadership. It's an important aspect for the system to run. The operator is essential to the decision taking. Prices in the market, or market price barriers here in Brazil that you know, and management of assets and available capacities. So maximize that used capacity. This must occur between areas, the sales and operational areas. They have to talk to each other and define. They say we are going to do this and that way and follow this decision. And many times there is not an alignment in some points that may bring gains. And the definition of the necessary buffers, you will always have problems, interruptions, but you have to define where we need a buffer. These buffers have additional costs. It's important to understand what is this cost and why. Or see just, oh, we have a peak, 40% peak, we have to serve this. No, but where can I go? And what is my ability to solve this? And what are the alternatives I have? And if I need a buffer, what would be this buffer? And if it has a cost? Now I will show you an example from Germany, just to show you different dimensions, showing these contracts, just for you to see the challenges you have. For example, BMG is the greatest operator of containers terminal in Europe. We move 14 T per year. We have the example of Hamburg port here. We have the main ports here in North Germany and also Italy, the ports where we operate this network that connect to markets. We say that the Bremerhaven port moves 14 T, and it is also a rail terminal. The increasing volumes, the fleet of big vessels is growing 300% since 2010. This means that you don't have to grow the volume to access another flow in the process. It's only necessary a greater vessel to reach the port. You have a peak compared to the previous part. These are the similarities we will know more and more in Brazil. Cabotage will grow, and of a long route also will go to greater vessels. And so when we talk about a linear growth in volume, we must not forget that we are going to work with greater ships, so we will have greater peaks and more challenges. This is a modal split of Hamburg, 6.4 million TEUs, 3.5, 61% on the road, and 30% rail, 0.1% shipping. In volume, we are talking about the rails here, 7.3. We are talking about 93 combinations of trains per day. So you have a row of 42 kilometers every day coming to this port. The volumes are very high. To absorb the movement of a ship, they stop for 8 to 10 hours a day. We have a volume, a very high movement of hours in terms of trucks, 2,600 trucks, 30 trains, and 4 feeder services. These are peak volumes, high volumes, and you have an interruption in the chain, the system dies. How to maintain stability in such a system? This is the advertising when they launched Euro Sprinter, trying to show how attractive was the service in Europe. The express service from Bremerhaven to Munich. This is being developed since 1999. And you did this rail hub. The rail hub will have a pre-gate, I learned this word in the morning, that you are doing the road hub. You have this rapid flow, the outflow, and entering the port, and you make the separation by route so that you may have efficiency between hubs, and a hub that may be 100 kilometers distant from port. A conclusion over this presentation. The first point is mindset is important. Turn to the collaboration among partners. This is a key point to develop multi-modal in Brazil, allied to IT, and have gains on a short-term basis. And we have, if we think about a rail hub in Santos, this will only generate gain. No, the gain is significant and may generate the increase is significant and may generate earnings or gains in the short term. Modalities do exist. I suppose that you must have a payback. You have a great demand, everybody needs this, and the difference of what you pay today and what we may pay with an existing volume, these projects have a payback. And so this must not be uninteresting. And how to channel the interests in a strong mode together with other areas of the industry to the public area, so that we have an understanding about the real interests that are aligned among industry. You have certain demands and they are put together and everybody discusses. And this is my own opinion, but I think that Brazil needs a showcase. We have to show something. We have many projects, a lot of demands. We discuss a lot. The understanding of the government is difficult also, and we have to make this strategic to give a push. And this may be example for other areas. This was my presentation. BMS acts in Brazil in the north and northeast, south and southeast, the operational logistics, in-house logistics, CKD and PDI, BLG, and MOSOF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephan. I think both of our presenters, as Flavio mentioned in the beginning, have given us great oversight, kind of one from a high level, maybe strategic side of what we need to do, and then Stephan with some case studies, particularly linking IT to the infrastructure and some of the network, and then obviously showing us some examples in Europe. Particularly, in case you didn't think rail could be sexy, I think that's what the Eurocombi showed us. Moving from the red light district to Bremerhaven, Hamburg, and Munich or something there. So something for Brazil to consider perhaps as well. I'd like to open the floor now, dropping things, to Q&A. Again, comments as well. We've been hearing from service providers, but we have manufacturers in the room. So please join in with your observations, comments, as well. So if we have any questions from the floor, we can start that out. If not, I'll keep us going a little longer. Okay, first question from my side to Stephan. With the IT system that you showed us, was that, and it was web-based, I believe, so was that a BMS in-house developed system? Did you do that together with an IT provider? Can you talk a little bit about how that system is developed?
It's a very interesting question. We tried to use market solutions. So we wanted to use a full market solution with customization by this company. We did many trials, but we opted to use a solution for, say, hold the fiscal transactions from the market, And we made an own development for this tracking and tracing for this transport management solution. We have this also in other operations, this challenge. Processes are very particular and very need a high customization level. So we go to one point with an external solution, and then we add on with an own solution. So we have people from our the IT department that are responsible for the process management and for the IT solution. So the people that best know the processes are in our IT department.
So obviously it requires quite a hybrid there between market solutions, internal sides. And Flavio, maybe just speaking generally a bit, some of the, what about WWL from an IT point of view? How do you integrate your services here in Brazil? I mean, do you have a similar sort of framework, or is it depend on customers, does it depend on solution?
No, we try to stay away to have a too customized tool, but like Stephan said, it's pretty much similar. So we have a hybrid solution, which is half developed in house and the other half developed by a third party. Since we're a global company, so you can't customize too much for one specific market. I understand what Stephan was talking about, the fiscal requirements, especially when it comes to Brazil, very, not to say bureaucratic, but very special place to do business. But we try to have one global tool that works across the globe.
Hey, we have a question in the front row. If you can just say name and company.
Olá, meu nome é Alexandre, sou da Hyundai Gloves. Minha dúvida é exatamente relacionada a sistemas. Eu tinha até anotado aqui. O sistema que você apresentou, Stephan, é um sistema que é global da BMS ou você adaptou ele para o mercado brasileiro? Porque nós temos uma legislação específica, uma carga tributária única aqui no Brasil.
It's unique in Brazil. So how did you do this adaptation? Is it global? There is something in parallel to run the financial and tax part. The system was developed here in Brazil, and it serves only Brazil. We carried out a piece of mapping job with all the flows of information. The fiscal flow, the tax flow is not simple. Transactions, when you're working with third parties, it arrived at a level of automation in these tax transactions to reduce paperwork.
E a conexão, a interface.
The interface with the international part, the receipt of information for the international supplies. Do you work with our systems, or do you input everything from the time you receive the load here in Brazil? I'm going to justify my question, because what we seek today, it's a point-to-point thing from when it was born until the time it's going to reach me. The system allows this integration with EDI, so it can be extended to other companies where we can receive this data and we can give this exposure or visibility to other scenarios such as that with the distribution via Manaus.
I have a comment on this side.
Fábio, da Scania.
Flavio from Scania. My question goes to Stephan. You talked a lot about the implementation of a system, but I think, as you said at the end, it's a new mindset. It's more than a system. It's a new way of connecting the chain. What were the greatest challenges in the implementation of this new mindset with the several operators? Can you talk a little bit more about that? It was a difficult job. The collaboration among the collaborators was difficult to start with, because you go out with people that are highly qualified in the TI, then you go to the shop floor, especially in certain regions in Brazil, Belém, Manaus. There has been a lot of resistance at the beginning, but our approach was more on top of the participation. But so the employee that's now working his process, we had him participate in the development. All the mapping was done together with key people in operations. That one who does the routing, and the check on the loading, these people participated in the project, and this improved this work a lot. What helped us a lot also was some people who bought the idea. So having 2 or 3 people in the end of a group of 100 that then pull the project in operation, this gave us a lot of force in the development of the system. At implementing, there was fear and resistance, and the fear of losing their jobs. If you have a lot of labor, people understand that automation will jeopardize their jobs. So this was a difficult process at the time of implementation. But since it brought very high gains on the daily life, and the operator had a great easiness to operate the system. It was so nice to operate it. So it was so easy because it was coming from a nightmare. There was a lot of paperwork, a lot of lists, controls. So these people started to understand that together with the training. They understood that this would make their lives a lot easier. And then we broke the ice, and now it's working with no problem. So the first 2-3 months of implementation was difficult in regards to resistance, but now it's fine.
Okay, thank you again. Any other points from the floor at this time? Obviously, the system gaining a lot of interest. Oh, sorry, you have a point right here.
Boa tarde a todos.
My name is Danilo Ramos. I work in Santos, Brazil. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Flavio and Stephan for their presentations and also for the organization of this event. I have a recommendation to make, taking as a basis the 2 presentations, what was said then. Flavio said during his presentation that he talked about the span of the North-Sul Road, which is being done with Valet, a public company. I'm going to put together with the Stephan's comment on the transportation of along the coast. This is an operation today that could be done, for example, from Manaus to the port of Belém or Vila do Conde in Pará, and from Pará it could come down in a railroad, or today a road railway to the works of the north-south, with differences in composition, but there's a lack of a 470 kilometers patch to be constructed from Porto de Vila do Conde to the extreme south of the country. So my recommendation is that the class associations that represent the sector, that represent the logistics, and also the public entities that today do the modeling of the whole Brazilian infrastructure. One example is Valek, who is at this time working in this part between Vila do Conde and Tailândia. They should be invited to participate in this panel, so that discussion could evolve in the sense of improving logistics and reduce costs and risks of the operations in Brazil. This is just a recommendation. É uma coisa que nós apreciamos muito.
With Gustavo a bit from on Anfavia's side, obviously about the government committees that Anfavia is working with. Obviously, that's a sort of group that we will try to pull in more here. But I don't want to speak on your behalf, Gustavo. But obviously, the inroads are being made to communicate with these bodies, and so, you know, in between our events and panels, then obviously these are things. So that sort of information needs to be communicated on. So just reiterating the importance of coming together there and addressing that. Yeah, thank you again for the point there. So any other comments, questions from the audience? Well, maybe on when we take an issue that is effectively as fundamental as, you know, a 500-kilometer gap in the railway, that would be one reason not to move multimodal, I suppose. Maybe what are some of the other, you know, basic hindrances that are stopping us right now? I mean, Flavio, you deal with Mexico because under your responsibility. You know, we talked about what they have. They also obviously have a huge network of rail cars which are connected directly to the US and Canada, you know, 55,000 in the whole North America, triple stack in some cases. I mean, this is tremendous investment. This is 20 years of or more assets. So, you know, where do we stand with Brazil? I mean, we're starting from zero. I mean, is there any, if we were to try to put in a service in the next year, realistically, where do we have to start?
É uma boa pergunta. Eu acho assim, se você comparar o México...
Good question. If you compare Mexico with Brazil, the volumes that we're talking about are very close. So if the investment happened in Mexico, why not in Brazil? So I talked a little bit during my presentation that many times the leadership of these projects must come from the private initiative. But I believe from my experience in the United States for some years and in Mexico, if it works there with this volume, and there is a necessary scale here in Brazil, and I believe that if the Brazilian companies that are not interested in that change, you can operate in their lines with own equipment. I think that there are companies in the United States that are already interested in making this investment and operating in Brazil. It's a large investment. We're talking about $500 million, as happened in Mexico, to increase the fleet of equipment. There is an OEM in the United States that did their own rail cards. Not necessarily they take only their vehicles, but they leave the operator of that line. They let the rail cars be used for our clients. But to summarize, I don't know why this shouldn't work in Brazil. These volumes are 3.6, arriving at 6 million vehicles a year in Brazil. No doubt it would be justifiable.
Stephan, do you have anything to add on that? Because obviously you're moving for two-wheelers, you have a multimodal solution, but I don't know if you have anything even remotely equivalent for vehicles at this time or in the automotive sector.
Nós vemos, vamos dizer, lá fora, né?
Abroad, I'm going to mention BLG example. There is high interest in having a competitive port with access, with modals access, in an extremely competitive manner. Our company participates in road transportation companies. We have 1,000 wagons for vehicles in Europe, and we serve the O&Ms. If you have loads in the port today, you must have competitive access. So here in Brazil, we depend upon investments. But from my standpoint, where there is potential, for example, it's in the distribution of vehicles. We know all the issues around it, but the inclusion of coastal transportation should happen to reduce costs that are extremely high right now. If you compare Santos Swap in Recife, you know what's the potential. So I know you have to tackle the large points to obtain gains that would be significant.
So obviously there's potential, there's investment opportunity, but it's a risk. So we'll see who's going to be brave enough to go there. Any other questions, comments from the audience? You're a quiet bunch. Maybe one other point on the port side, because at this conference last year, we talked quite a bit about some of the reforms that were put through, some privatization, opportunity for investment. I think we agreed that it was complicated, difficult, that there were, I don't know where we stand on that this year, what's happened over the last year. Flavio, maybe you want to talk about where do you see hope that there's more RoRo investment going into intercoastal ports, or are we, a week after an election where the same government is staying, and we kind of just going to float around in the same place?
I wish. Sim, eu gostaria que tivesse mais investimentos.
We would like to have more investments in the terminals and ho-ho part. Unfortunately not. If you look at the bids that are about to happen, São Sebastião, Paranaguá, and other ports, the focus are always containers. We cannot pile up cars yet, but unfortunately not. Most investments or the pipeline for the next 2-3 years is for containers. What changed from last year, from last conference until now, taking into consideration the example of the Port of Santos, there with 2 or 3 new terminals, 2 large terminals in the Port of Santos, there is a better split of the volumes. And I think that the queue that Gustavo showed in the morning, that long queue, obviously the diversification of the terminals in Santos with new capacity was also one of the factors that reduced that queue. And for us, the clients of the O&Ms, that helped a lot in the and also improved in the Port of Santos and in Paranaguá as well. But I don't see any investments in the ho-ho part in the next few years.
We've seen some short-term improvements, but perhaps not yet the groundwork for a long term. Okay, are there any other last questions at this time? Otherwise, we'll probably break for coffee. Well, again, I think that was another interesting discussion. Again, looking on that long-term side, I think that's important, looking at what investment we need to see for the future. It is risky, but to make Brazil multimodal, I don't think there's any other way but to hopefully see someone take that risk. I'd probably go back a little bit to the first session, and I was saying to someone at lunch as well, the last few years, the theme of this conference has often been, or not the theme, but the message has often been that, if we don't invest in capacity, then we won't be able to meet the demand. There's been a bit of a change with maybe the drop in demand. It seems that if we don't invest and we don't improve the logistics, then we're not going to be competitive to move forward at all, really. It's at the market, we were not competitive enough. So I think logistics still at the center of that sort of argument. But so not to end on a gloomy note there, but hopefully next year we'll have some more positive things to follow up on. So once again, thanks very much to our panel, and let's join us again for a coffee break.